So we've got some huge rules reveals for the Genestealer cult forces today. Let's take a look at the core rules for all three of the other previewed detachments, where I think some melee heavy Genestealer cults are looking far more fun than they were before with the brutal Biosanctic Broodsurge. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today we're talking Genestealer cult once again. The codex is coming out at the weekend, and Games Workshop have given us an interesting rules preview, going really quite in depth on the new detachments. Seems that Games Workshop's keeping Sisters rules under wraps. We've got both of the codexes coming out at the weekend. I guess we'll have a preview rule set for them sometime tomorrow. Between this and the previous things, we now know really quite a lot about the new Codex Genestealer cults. We know they've got 5 detachments, including their Index one, the new Benefactus models, including some fun psychic shooting rules for him, a split datasheet for the Acolyte hybrids, both with and without hand flamers, and perhaps the slightly mixed blessing news that Brood Brothers get a detachment that allows them to be fielded with some good support, but unfortunately they're going away for the rest of the detachments in the Codex, which I think really is a shame and will be annoying to a bunch of collectors out there. In this preview though, we've got rules revealed for the other detachments. The Host of Ascension is indeed the renamed Index version. They said that they're going to have remixed stratagems and new enhancements, something that could be good, though might not be all that great. I feel like Index Genestealer cults had some really quite powerful stratagems and enhancement options, so hopefully that isn't just a euphemism for made worse. But beyond that, the other ones that I was most interested in were the Biosanctic Broodsurge, melee heavy Genestealer cults, and this one genuinely looks quite threatening at first impressions. Xenocreed Congregation, cult leaders, and horde units, which again I think sounds kind of fun, though I feel like I'm a bit mid as to their core detachment rule. And the Outlander Claw, that one's for fast attack Genestealer units, particularly Aztlan Jackals, maybe a little bit of support for vehicles as well. The Codex goes on sale this weekend alongside the new Combat Patrol with the Jackals and the Ridge Runner, plus that Biosanctic Broodsurge box set. If you were picking up any 40k models, then the channel's affiliate links down in the video description can save a bit versus Games Workshop's main web store, discounts between 10 and 20% depending on where you are in the world. A big thank you to any of you guys picking things up through those links when you do choose to get something. It does help support the channel. For the Battle Forces, the pre-orders will be going live on Saturday the 8th. Here are the rough timings for them: midnight in the USA and Canada, Central Time and Eastern Time for the affiliate links in particular, then 10 AM in the UK and midday Eastern Time in Australia. If you're trying to land the Battle Force box sets at a discount, it's probably worth being early. We don't know how much supply Games Workshop's made of them, and be ready to fall back to the Games Workshop web store if they don't give the discount retailers any of them. Let's get into rules teasers though, and first up we had the small unit preview that Jackals are gaining stealth. They just said that offhand in one of the paragraphs talking about the Outlander Claw. They still get 12-inch moves and 9-inch scout moves, and now they have stealth as well, so are a little bit tougher at range. Really not the worst rule in the world for sort of outrider skirmish biker type units. I feel like out of the cult units, a small boost isn't the worst thing for them, provided it doesn't come with a potence increase as well. They did feel like a unit that was maybe a little bit lesser played after the big combos with their crazy mortal wound demo charge got broken a little bit with the interaction with the Jackal Alphas. Overall though, a little bit of extra durability in any form is pretty handy for a unit that's going to be on the forefront of the army. Getting into those detachments though, and first up we have the Xenocreed Congregation. The idea behind this one is it's dedicated to cult leaders and the unquestioning loyalty and fanaticism of their devotees. So the idea for this one is that you're going to be building around the Magus Primus and Acolyte Icon Ward, leading squads of Acolytes, Neophytes, and Mesomorphs. Seems like if you want to run Horde Mode Genestealer cult, then this one's probably going to be a good option. I guess slightly weighed up against the Index version. For the core rule of it though, I'm a little bit unconvinced as to how much use it's going to be. Basically for the Acolytes, Metamorphs and Neophytes, you get to reroll advanced rolls and reroll charged rolls, plus they grant a 3+ feel no pain to any Magus Primus or Icon Ward attached to them. None of those are bad things, I just say they're not really all that impactful. The advanced rolls could maybe give you a little bit more reliability, getting to an objective or something, though usually you're going to be passing up the chance to deal damage, whether it's shooting or charging, unless there happens to be some sort of stratagem to allow that in this detachment. Rerolling charge rolls I feel like is a bit more impactful, particularly as you might have things coming out of Deep Strike Reserve and then doing some shooting damage, then perhaps trying to charge the enemy. That ups your chance to around about a 50-50 chance of your unit getting in. So that one's not the worst, I suppose. The 3+ feel no pain I think is handy to have, though realistically it's only going to be useful against precision attacks. I guess particularly for a Primus, that could genuinely make them tough enough that they don't really need to worry about any one attack just instantly killing them, and might make the opponent think twice about using Epic Challenge or similar. Overall, I feel like it's an alright peripheral supporting rule, though probably isn't going to be something that you enormously build around unless they have some really big rules to support this in the stratagem section. Certainly, if the Ascension Day type one still has the sustained hits and the ignores cover, that one feels like a much more powerful and easy to get value out of rule. That's definitely not the end of it though, as they're going to get 4 enhancements and 6 stratagems. Some of them could be really impactful. We can only see one of each so far. I think it's a really good start for the enhancements one, with one called Deeds That Speak to the Masses. You take a Magus Primus or Acolyte Icon Ward, and then once per turn when you're rolling for Cult Ambush for a battle line unit, you get to re-roll the result. That's a pretty fantastic little extra value there. It means that you'll be a lot more likely to return something like an Acolyte or Neophyte squad that was slain early. It would really help with those early game Cult Ambush rolls. It could be really punishing if something important gets slain early and then doesn't choose to come back, just literally out of bad luck, even if they were returning on a 3+. Unless this one is extortionately expensive, I feel like this one's a very solid choice. Maybe it could be nice on an Icon Ward sat at the back to protect those blip tokens in a squad of Neophytes maybe. Otherwise, for 1 CP, there's a stratagem called Vengeance for the Martyr. Again, this one seems to be alright to me. You trigger this one in the enemy shooting or fight phase when an enemy unit kills a character, and then for the rest of the game, Acolytes, Neophytes, and Metamorphs all get to reroll hit rolls of 1 against that enemy unit that slew the character. And if that slain character happens to be a Magus Primus or Acolyte Icon Ward, you get 4 hit rerolls against that target instead. You also need to have one other Genestealer cult character still on the board to trigger it, but I feel like in this detachment you're probably going to have one. Overall for 1 CP, this one again will be auto-used in some situations if it can affect something really big and important. I guess perhaps the optimal time would be if an enemy Chaos Knight or Imperial Knight or something destroys a squad with the character inside it, trigger this to mark them for death, and then drop in a whole bunch of damage dealers. This will then get 4 hit rerolls against the targets. Might be a bit opportunistic though, and unless the Primus's rules change, then there'll be some overlap with how he is currently. Might be a bit less useful if your most important damage dealers already are getting full hit rerolls. Still seems handy enough though. Moving on to the next one, and perhaps the one that seems most exciting on the face of it, just for the core rule, is the Biosanctic Broodsurge, basically trying to make Genestealer Cult melee great again. This one feels like it's the one that's going to be going for the Twisted Helix sort of vibe as per the 9th edition codex, and this one is one that buffs out the Aberrants, the Pure Strains, and anything led by a Biophagus. So I feel like an army could take multiple of the former, and then maybe 3 Biophaguses to lead some battle line type units and get his good buffs on there. I think the detachment rule looks really straightforward and easy to use. You get +1 to your charge rolls, which is pretty nice. That means an 8-inch charge out of Deep Strike, so a 66% chance to make that charge if you budget a command point reroll for it, which seems fairly strong. Certainly helpful for on the board stuff as well, of course, but perhaps the really good bit is that you get +1 attack for those same units that made a charge move. It means that you could be getting 4 attack Aberrants with their scary strength 8 and damage 3, 5 attack Pure Strains with their mass good AP 1 damage attacks, or 3 attack mining weapons with a Biophagus Acolyte squad perhaps. Overall I feel like this is probably enough to make melee Genestealer Cult a whole load more interesting. More units getting into combat more reliably, and then when they get there they're extra savage on the charge. Then though they've got a couple of things that double down on that on the stratagems as well. For yet more raw might in melee, they've got 1 command point for Twisted Gene Muscle. Aberrants, Biophagus, or Pure Strain units get +1 to wound against monsters or vehicles in the fight phase. That's nice, simple, direct, and useful. Aberrants will certainly enjoy that with their mid-strength, strength 8 attacks. That means they'll be wounding basically anything in the game on a 4+, and it'll likely change Pure Strains from just doing a few chip wounds to most vehicles to actually clawing off a fair few wounds off one vehicle. They will get a lot of attacks with good AP that hit pretty accurately, and then getting +1 to wound on those attacks means at least a fair amount of them should wound and chip some good damage. Otherwise, for 1 command point and doubling down on those charge moves, we've got 1 command point for Stimulated Biosurge. This one's a slightly interestingly worded stratagem that basically means that you get a big boost if you try and multi-charge things, but even at its base it is an extra +1 to charge anyway. Provided you select the closest unit to you as the target of your charge, you get +1 to your charge, so overall that's going to be +7 inches charging from reserve. Could be super reliable if you also have a command point reroll in the bank, but beyond that, if you can also nominate other charge targets, for each other unit that you declare on, you get a further +1 to your charge to a maximum of +3 inches total. So between all that, say if you dropped from Deep Strike and were able to say declare on 2 units that are both 9 inches away, after the detachment buff you'd be making a 6-inch charge there, so very reliable indeed. It's a bit of a weird one to have a stratagem that really helps you multi-charge quite so much, but definitely could be useful on occasion, and even the +1 isn't awful just by itself out of reserve. I guess it helps as another interesting option to get them to melee. I think you would have to weigh it up whether it's just worth using the command point reroll. As for that one, you can save that until you've actually seen whether you fail or make the charge, potentially making it a bit better value unless you're getting a serious amount of extra movement out of this one. Overall seems like good stuff so far. 3 simple boosts in getting units to melee and then hitting hard when you do so. Feels like the detachment could have some interest, even if the rest turns out to be kind of bad, though hopefully there'll be a few more fun things. Finally, for the new detachments, we've got the Outlander Claw. This one is the fast attack focused Genestealer cult detachment. Maybe feels like it would work okay for the combat patrol perhaps, and it seems to be focused on Jackals, Ridge Runners, and maybe transport vehicles as well. Although I feel like we don't really have that much of a sense of the detachment yet, we're going to need to see more of the enhancements and the stratagems. The core rule is kind of curious in that it's an objective play one. Rapid Takeover basically gives double the objective control to your mounted and vehicle units, so I guess unless there's any other surprise changes to datasheets, that'd be OC2 Jackals, so 10 OC from a squad of 5 of them, which I guess is fairly chunky, or 6 OC Ridge Runners, or 4 OC Goliath trucks. That's definitely not unhelpful in keeping the army scoring objectives a bit more. I guess with a lot of these you might be zooming units around, moving very fast to contest and stop the enemy scoring. I feel like Jackals with that OC could do that pretty well. On top of that, you also get the sticky objectives rules for the Jackal bikes. That triggers at the end of the command phase, and the objective will then remain under your control until your opponent can control it at the start or end of any turn. It does mean that you might have a bit more flexibility in marking a point and then moving on. It's definitely not unhelpful, and in the average game might well be good for a few more victory points than you might have otherwise scored. I can't help but think that it's just not really the most exciting rule in the entire world, though. It's not really adding any extra damage, defense, or mobility options to your units. It's just literally making you score points a little bit more easily. So it does rather put the onus on the stratagems and enhancements to actually make the detachment a bit more threatening. Unfortunately for the other options though, we've only got just the one preview. This one is a stratagem called Along Shadowed Trails, though admittedly this one does seem handy enough. This one only applies if you've got an Atalan Jackals unit that's in cult ambush, so basically it's been destroyed and you've passed your roll earlier in the game, and then there's a cult ambush token on the board that the opponent has just moved within 9 inches of, basically removing it from play. If both of those things are the case, which doesn't seem impossible in this detachment given that you've probably got lots of Jackal units moving forward, then for one command point you can basically just redeploy that cult ambush token somewhere else, put it somewhere within 6 inches of a board edge, and then that token can only be used by the Jackals unit. After that, you can't flex it out for other squads. I say this one's alright in a defensive sort of stratagem, though maybe not the single most impactful all by itself. Ideally, you'd not want to use this and just deploy the tokens kind of safely, but if the opponent could move to this, or maybe sacrifices some annoying movements to get them all the way over to it, then if it saves a big unit of Jackals, which at minimum would be 90 points right now, and maximum would be 180, it's more than worth 1 CP. And it could just make your opponent a bit less inclined to bother moving units to try and scrub the tokens rather than just staying safe or attacking your squads. If they know that you can just defend the token for 1 command point, they might think twice about it. Overall, I'd say that this one's alright and definitely not unhelpful. Doesn't really feel like something that's actually going to add a huge amount of raw strength to the detachment though. I sort of feel like between this and the primary rule, we really just don't know enough to judge this detachment and whether or not it's actually going to be good or not. Look forward to seeing the rest though. Hopefully they have some pretty useful damage defense or movement shenanigans for all the fast movers. In any case, there are a few interesting things there. I feel like for the rules that were actually teased today, the most exciting one by far is the Biosanctic Broodsurge. Just seems very direct and effective with some big hitting mutants in melee. I must admit I did always enjoy the Twisted Helix style of play, just hitting the enemy really hard out of reserve. Was always kind of fun and punchy. The other two I'm a little bit less convinced on, their core rules just don't seem as strong. though hopefully once we've seen all the options, enhancements and stratagems, there'll be enough to make those armies interesting styles of play in their own right, and do enough to make them actual interesting options to rival the main host of Ascension type detachments. In any case, it will be interesting to take a look at the full codex rules once they're out. I'll certainly review them here on the channel, and as mentioned earlier, the book does release at the weekend. Feel free to check out the links down in the video description where the book and the Battle Force box sets and the combat patrols go live. Any purchases made through them do save a bit of money versus Games Workshop and help support the channel. In any case, look forward to talking more Genestealer cults in the future. Feel free to subscribe to the channel if you'd like to see more, and let me know what you think of those previewed rules. Finally, if you have been enjoying the videos on the channel, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page as well, and you can find that linked in the video description if you'd like to help support and keep these videos coming. Channel patrons do get a few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things come next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you or you'd just like to help support, the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.